Translation of Antonio Morga'S Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas. What if I told you that before the Spaniards arrived, Filipinos already had a thriving civilization? A society with its own government, trade, and culture. In 1609, Spanish official Antonio de Morga wrote a book titled Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas, a detailed account of Spanish rule in the Philippines. But over 280 years later, José Rizal, a Filipino nationalist, discovered this book and saw something powerful, proof that Filipinos were not savages needing Spanish rule, but a people with a rich history of their own. In this video, we'll dive deep into Rizal's annotations of Morga'S work and uncover the real history of pre-colonial Filipinos. Who was Antonio de Morga? Antonio de Morga was a Spanish lawyer, historian, and high-ranking colonial official in the Philippines from 1595 to 1603. As a servant of the Spanish crown, he documented the events of the Spanish conquest in the Philippines in his book Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas. What is Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas about? Morga'S book was written to document the Spanish conquest and their so-called civilizing mission in the Philippines. It covers topics such as Spanish expeditions, battles, missionary efforts, and the state of the colony under Spanish rule. But as you might expect, it was written from the perspective of a Spanish official, glorifying colonization and downplaying the rich civilization of the Filipino people. Rizal's discovery and annotation. Centuries later, José Rizal, a young Filipino scholar and nationalist, discovered Morga'S book while studying in Europe. He immediately realized its importance. It contained one of the few detailed accounts of the Philippines before total Spanish domination. However, Rizal also saw the book's flaws and biases. So in 1890, he annotated the book, correcting Morga'S colonial narrative and proving that Filipinos had a flourishing civilization before Spain arrived. Key annotations by Rizal. Pre-colonial civilization was advanced. Morga described Filipinos as barbaric and uncivilized, but Rizal argued otherwise. He pointed out that before the Spaniards came, Filipinos already had an organized government, a thriving trade network with China, Japan, and neighboring countries, and a rich cultural identity. The Spaniards did not save Filipinos, they destroyed their culture. Morga claimed that Spanish rule improved the Philippines by introducing Christianity and governance. But Rizal countered that argument, stating that Spain actually disrupted and destroyed Filipino culture, imposing heavy taxes, forced labor, and erasing native traditions. The Filipino language and writing system. Did you know that Filipinos already had their own writing system before Spain arrived? While Morga did not mention this, Rizal emphasized that Filipinos used Baybayin, an ancient script that was widely used before the Spaniards imposed the Latin alphabet. The suppression of indigenous culture. One of Rizal's biggest criticisms was that Spain erased indigenous Filipino culture. The Spaniards burned ancient records, replaced native religious practices with Catholicism, and treated Filipinos as second-class citizens in their own land. The impact of Rizal's annotations on Philippine nationalism. Rizal's annotations were not just about correcting historical errors, they were about awakening the Filipino identity. By showing that Filipinos had a proud and advanced history, Rizal inspired the revolution against Spain. His work fueled the nationalist movement, leading to the Philippine Revolution of 1896. The economic system before and during Spanish colonization. Before Spanish colonization, Filipinos had a thriving economy based on agriculture, trade, and craftsmanship. They traded gold, textiles, and pottery with China, Japan, and the Middle East. However, when the Spaniards came, they introduced an exploitative system, where Filipinos were forced to work under polo y servicio, pay tributes, and produce goods for the benefit of Spain. The role of women in pre-colonial and colonial Philippines. Unlike what Morga wrote, Filipino women before colonization played powerful roles in society. They were leaders, babaylans, priestesses, and merchants. Women could own land and participate in decision-making. But with the arrival of the Spaniards, these rights were restricted. Women were expected to follow the Catholic Church's ideals of obedience and submission, reducing their role to homemakers. The galleon trade and its impact on the Philippines. Morga described the Manila-Acapulco galleon trade as beneficial, but Rizal saw it differently. The galleon trade enriched only the Spaniards and a few elites, while ordinary Filipinos suffered. Farmers and artisans were forced to prioritize exports for Spain instead of growing food for their own people, leading to widespread poverty. The role of religion in colonization. Morga praised Spanish missionaries for spreading Christianity, but Rizal emphasized that religion was also a tool of colonization. Friars controlled education, dictated laws, and oppressed Filipinos who resisted conversion. However, Christianity also united Filipinos, as seen in how it played a role in inspiring the revolution against Spain. The weapons and warfare of pre-colonial Filipinos. Filipinos had their own weapons, such as the campilan, kris, and bow and arrows. Contrary to Morga's assertion that they were weak fighters, Rizal highlighted their resistance against Spanish forces, proving their military capability. The agricultural expertise of Filipinos. Rizal pointed out that Filipinos were already skilled farmers before Spanish colonization. They cultivated rice, corn, sugarcane, and various crops using sophisticated irrigation systems such as the Bano rice terraces, which were built without modern machinery. He noted that the Spaniards did not introduce agriculture to the natives but rather exploited the existing agricultural systems for their benefit. Forced labor under Spanish rule disrupted local farming and led to food shortages. The indigenous political system of barangays. Rizal corrected Morga by stating that barangays were not disorganized tribes but well-structured communities with established laws, governance, and economic systems. Each barangay was ruled by a datu, who acted as the leader, judge, and military commander. Under his rule were elders and council members, who helped mediate conflicts and make community decisions. Justice was maintained through customary laws, often passed down orally. These laws included regulations on trade, marriage, property ownership, and punishments for crimes. The idea of barangays being primitive was a colonial misconception. Instead, they were highly organized socio-political entities with diplomatic relations, even engaging in alliances and conflicts with other barangays. The maritime power of ancient Filipinos. Filipinos were expert seafarers, with boats capable of long-distance travel and warfare. Rizal highlighted that native Filipinos were not passive but actively engaged in trade and naval defense. Indigenous trade networks. Morga downplayed the economic achievements of pre-colonial Filipinos, but Rizal emphasized that indigenous trade was flourishing long before the Spanish arrived. Coastal communities engaged in commerce with Chinese, Japanese, Indian, and Malay traders, exchanging gold, pearls, textiles, and spices. Rizal argued that the Spanish disrupted these economic networks by imposing the galleon trade system, which limited the economic autonomy of Filipinos. The pre-colonial justice system. Rizal highlighted that before the Spanish arrived, Filipinos had a structured justice system based on customary laws, which were passed down orally and later recorded on bamboo and palm leaves. These laws were enforced by the datas and councils of elders, ensuring fair resolutions to disputes. Penalties varied based on the crime, but the system emphasized restorative justice rather than harsh punishment. Rizal contrasted this with Spanish rule, where justice was often arbitrary, favoring Spanish elites over natives. Rizal's last message and the importance of studying history. Rizal's annotations of Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas were more than historical corrections, they were a call for Filipino identity and pride. He showed that Filipinos had a rich civilization before Spain and that colonization was not the blessing the Spaniards claimed it to be. Today, it is our duty to remember our true history, to question colonial narratives, and to never forget the words of Rizal.
Ang hindi marunong lumingon sa pinanggalingan ay hindi makararating sa paroroonan.
The year is 1593. The Spanish Empire continues to expand, reaching the distant islands of the Philippines. Among those who will witness and record its conquest is a man named Antonio de Morga.
I am Antonio de Morga, a servant of the Spanish crown. I have been entrusted with the governance of these islands, to document the glory of Spain's conquest and to record the lives of these distant people.
The first contact with the natives.
Strangers approach our land. Their ships are large, like floating mountains. We must be cautious, but also learn their purpose.
Prepare to go ashore. We come in the name of King Philip.
The first encounter was not just a meeting of two civilizations, but the beginning of a long and painful history. The colonization begins.
The natives are intelligent but lack the order and discipline of Spain. It is our duty to civilize them, to bring them the light of God and the greatness of our empire.
We have our own ways. We govern ourselves with wisdom, passed from our ancestors.
You must accept the one true faith, or suffer the consequences. Your idols and false gods have no place in our world.
The native resistance.
We shall not bow to these foreigners. The land of our ancestors shall not be taken. We fight for our people, for our freedom.
The natives resist, but they are no match for the might of the Spanish army. We shall conquer these lands fully, for the glory of the empire.
Morga wrote of our ancestors as if they were savages. But the truth is different. Our people were great before Spain came. I must correct this false history.
Through Rizal's annotations, the true history of the Philippines was revealed. The Filipino people had a civilization long before colonization, a civilization that must never be forgotten. The legacy lives on. History is written by the victors, but the truth will always find a way to be told. The story of the Filipino people is one of resilience, courage, and the unbreakable spirit of a nation that refuses to be forgotten. The story of Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas and Rizal's annotations teaches us an important lesson. History is not just about the past, it shapes our identity, our beliefs, and our future. Through Rizal's work, we learn that colonial narratives must be questioned. We should never accept history at face value, especially when it is written by those in power. Instead, we must seek the truth, examine different perspectives, and recognize the greatness of our ancestors. More importantly, Rizal's annotations remind us of the value of national pride. The Filipinos of the past were not mere victims of colonization. They were warriors, traders, leaders, and thinkers. They had a civilization worthy of respect and recognition. The moral lesson here is clear: know your history. Protect your identity. And never allow others to define who you are as a people. Just as Rizal fought to uncover the truth, we too must continue the fight for historical accuracy, national pride, and cultural preservation.